My name is Dale, and I'm an addict. I've been clean since April 22nd, 1997. It's 7,678 days today. My goal is for my clean time to pass up my prison time, which is 9,088 days. Now that's a long time. As far as my clean time is concerned, 21 years seems awesome. I mean, that's old enough to buy alcohol, old enough to buy weed, and mature enough to realize I don't need to this time. But realistically, I'm not doing anything that anybody else in AA isn't doing. I've just been doing it longer than some, and not as long as others. You know, in the basic text it says, an addict, any addict, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. The message is hope, and the promise is freedom. And I accepted that promise. When you hear my story, you'll realize I really did. It's a miracle. And the miracle is called Narcotics Anonymous. I have a family. Narcotics Anonymous gave it to me. And I claim that family. You know, I'm 61 years old. And I was raised in an area where almost everybody was either native or white. And I was both, and I grew up with this chip on my shoulder. And I learned to get beat up by whites and Indians, and I had this attitude that I had to be the best, because I had to be better than the whites, I had to be better than the natives, I had to be the best. And that drove me to trying to overachieve and wearing myself out. And I went in the Army when I was 20, dropped out of college, and thought I was going to be the miracle they were looking for, because here I was educated, and a lot of these guys didn't go in with an education, and I thought I was really something. But I also realized that being in the Army, I was a man, and men drank, so I drank. Found myself getting in trouble, found myself constantly headed for a wreck. And when I got out of the Army, I decided to quit drinking. And I could keep that promise for about 6 months at a time, and then something would come up. Have a drink with the boss, have a drink with a customer, fellow employees, or my girlfriend. Anyway, I would end up drinking for a couple of weeks and find my morals dropping again, and then I would quit. And I maintained this until the mid-80s. In the mid-80s, I was working for an auction company, and I was buying and selling equipment and repairing equipment, setting up sales, doing auctions, selling farm equipment, construction equipment. And we had a customer. And this customer, he would come in the day before the sale, and I'd talk to him about the equipment and to let him know what was really good quality that he would probably be able to get cheap, because he just needed a simple things like a paint job. And the next day he would come into the sale and he would buy junk. And the guy had money. I couldn't understand why he was buying junk. And then one day he came to me and he told me that he had a nuisance abatement problem, and that if I'd get him out of the problem, he would split everything with me. So I went down to check his place out in Napa, and he had 2 acres. It was 14 feet deep in equipment. And I thought, wow, I could fix this stuff up and probably make $250,000 that year. So I jumped on it and quit my job and started moving equipment for about 8 months. And a lot of times when I'd be on the road and I'd come back, a lot of stuff would be ripped off, and mainly my stuff getting ripped off, and I couldn't understand why with all this equipment my stuff is the only thing disappearing. And then one day, a bunch of bikers came into the property in Galt and started loading equipment, the stuff that I'd fixed up, and I got mad, and come to find out that my partner didn't own this stuff, that he was a laundryman for this motorcycle club, and it was theirs. So after a lot of words and stuff, I packed my stuff up and I left. And I had a lot of equipment in storage, because when I got out of the Army, my religion was tools, and every time I got paid, I bought more tools. And in the auction business, I bought equipment, sold equipment, and stocked up. So I opened up a welding shop, machine shop, building transfer trailers, and dump trucks, and repairing equipment. And I'd gotten 3 acres, and I sold the front acre because I didn't need frontage, because my type of business, people knew where you was, and they came to you. And they also set it up to be prime property for illegal activity. And the motorcycle club, they started coming in, and they told me that I didn't have a right to leave, and I didn't even know I worked for them. But they insisted that I was going to go back to work for that guy, and I was going to run my shop, and they was going to be able to do what they wanted there. And then if I ever wanted anything, I'd have to come to them on my hands and knees. And so they would come in, they'd bust my shop up, and they'd bust me up. And they did this for a couple of years, and finally got to where I couldn't even have my signs up because I was afraid of what would happen to my customers. So I lost the business and went to work for a sawmill, and I got clean. I stayed clean for a couple of months. You know, during the time that when I first started the shop, I was using methamphetamines to complete contracts, and I'd buy a $20 bag, and it'd last me a couple of weeks. And then when the bikers started coming in and everything, I found out that I could get an 8-ball for $150, which is the average price in the late 80s. And to me, that was 6 months supply. Well, that 6 months supply lasted 2 weeks, and I was running and going, and it was just nonstop. But I didn't want this club to catch me sleeping. So then, when I was working at the sawmill, I was head millwright, and a guy got seriously injured on the job, and it became my job to save him, which I did. And he went to the hospital. They took him to the hospital, and he died. And so I got fired, and I went back to using drugs. And I found out that this laundryman was selling the property that all of my equipment was on. It was like $30,000 worth of equipment. And my wife was on me that we needed money, and she was an addict, and she was pregnant. She was 9 months along. And so I went down there to try to talk to the guy and see if I could get my equipment back. And just laughed at me, of course. So he told me that he was gone to Napa that night, and I knew that his habit when he went to Napa was to be there for 3 or 4 days. And so I snuck back that night to get my equipment, and it was a trap. And he was there waiting for me, and we got in a big argument, and he threatened to kill my wife. She was 9 months along, and he sicked his dog on me. He had a pretty good sized dog, and was trying to hit me with a mag flashlight, but he held on to the leash, and so he was wide open, and every time he would pull the flashlight back, I would kick him in the face, and he went backwards and hit his head and died, and I put him in a box, and I poured 4 gallons of muriatic acid on him. So I turned this Purarian black and tried to deliver him back to his club as a warning to leave me alone, and I got caught. Well, in the movies, this kind of stuff happens, and you ride off in the sunset, and you're the hero. And in my case, you know, the county that happened in said it was self-defense, but the county where the club was from decided they would pick it up, and they tried me for capital murder in first degree, and they couldn't find a jury that was willing to put me to death for killing the person that I killed. So I was acquitted, but they retried me for second degree. But when I was facing the charges of capital murder, about once a month, they would chain my hands behind my back and chain my feet together, chain my feet to my hands and bring me down the halls, kicking me into the walls, and put me in a salad fort, kicking me back and forth, trying to get me to plead guilty. And I wouldn't do that. So then they tried me again. They got me for second degree. And the whole time I was in jail, the guards kept telling me when I got to prison that this motorcycle gang was going to kill me. And I'd never been to prison before. So when I arrived in San Quentin in January 7th of 92, you know, I got arrested April 19th, 1990. So I spent almost 2 years fighting my case. And I got there, and I'm with friends, people I knew from jail, and so I felt pretty safe. And they're taking me to West Hall, and they give me a card and told me, "This is your cell, go find it." And I went looking for it, couldn't find it. Came back, turned out I was in Carson section, not West Hall. So they took me over there. Now I'm away from it, the people I know, and all by myself. And they take me into Carson section and tell me to go up the stairs to the 5th floor to my cell. You know, where I come from, you know, everybody's native, or white. I'm not used to different races, and great big monstrous black guys coming towards me. And so I stepped aside to let him go first up the stairs, and he wouldn't do that, you know. I'm like, what do I do now? So I went up the stairs, and he's behind me, and, you know, nothing happened, but man, I was scared. I'd never been to prison before, and I got this great big black guy following me up the stairs, and, you know, I went to my cell, and heart beating 90 miles an hour. And when I got out of reception, they sent me to Old Folsom, and I thought, keep my head down, and everything will be fine. But God, I was scared, and I was trying to just stay out of sight, out of mind, and not let anybody know who I was. And so the first day, I went to the weight pile. It's pouring down rain, and I'm freezing. And the guy came up beside me, and he stabbed the guy in front of me in the chest. And when he pulled the shank out, blood squirted on his thermal shirt, and the guy that he stabbed just stood there and died. And, so the guy that stabbed him, he got blood on his shirt, so he doesn't want to get caught, so he took it off and he threw it down. And you know, there's a gunner on the rail above us with a Mini 14. And I looked at him, I said, "You don't want it?" And he said, "No," and I squatted down with the gunner up there. I didn't care. And I washed that shirt out. I rolled it up and I brought it in. And on the way in, everybody kept coming up to me telling me, "Man, you're crazy." And I'm telling them, you know, I'm doing life. What are they going to do to me? I don't care. You know? And next time I went to yard, I had a warm shirt and a reputation. You know, everybody said, "Man, that guy's crazy. He doesn't care. Don't mess with him." And I thought I was doing good. And after a couple months, they moved this great big guy in my cell. And when I was in the yard one day, he went through my paperwork and found out I killed somebody from this motorcycle club. And so when I came in, he told me that I either had to put out or he was going to tell the club who I was. And I told him, "I'll give you the best time of your life, and when we're done, I'm going to slice both of our throats because I just don't care." And he's like, "You don't need to go there." And I thought, "You already did." And so he decided to leave me alone. And when they opened up for yard, I grabbed my paperwork and I went to yard and found the biggest biker I could find from that club and told him, "We need to talk." And he says, "What's up, Dale?" And I was like, "Wow, you know who I am? I mean, I've been trying to be hiding, thinking these guys are looking for me." And he told me, "We knew you was coming here before you did." And he says, "What's up?" So I explained to him what was going on, and he went over to the hobby shop, jerked the guy out of the chair in front of the guards and told him to roll it up. And so when I got back to my cell, the guy was gone and didn't have any problems, you know. And but I lived off this reputation of beating a big biker up, and didn't tell anybody what club it was from because that was my deal with them, that I wouldn't tell what club he was. I wouldn't put their club down. And so I beat up child molesters and rapists and people who hadn't paid their drug debts in exchange for free drugs. So I lived off the drugs until 1997 free. And in 1997 I was working in the machine shop, and they had me cutting screens off of windows on the 2nd floor and wouldn't let me have a ladder. So I fell 10 feet and I landed on my face, and my head went back and hit my spine, and my brain bounced off my skull, and I was screwed up. You know, I was all crippled up and paralyzed on the left-hand side. And I spent 6 months looking in the mirror, just learning to smile again. You know, it's like, God, how do I do this? And you know, I'd lost my son. You know, the state took him away, and divorced my wife, and my mother died, and I'm doing life, and I'm crippled. And I became depressed. And I quit using the minute when I got hurt. I always had this policy on that I'd be clean on my son's birthday, and my son's birthday was April 23rd, so I didn't use on the 22nd. And I didn't use again after that. And my main reason at first was because They don't give you drugs to beat people up if you can't stand up. And I didn't want to be a guy getting beat up. It didn't matter if you're crippled or not. You owed it. You pay it in there. And some of my friends, they'd come by, they would offer me drugs to help with the pain at first. And I just turned it down because I knew I had to quit. I had to quit then. And if I accepted the free drugs, I probably wouldn't have the strength to quit later. So I just quit. And it was just sheer determination. I didn't have a program. And without a program, I became depressed. I was miserable. I mean, I wasn't using, but I didn't have a life. And the more depressed I got, the more I drove people away. And the more I drove people away, the more depressed I became. And I went to work in the psych department. In the psych department, I hid my problems very good. I worked for I think it was 27 psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers, and none of them knew I had a problem. But I'd been misdiagnosed. They thought I had seizures, and so they prescribed Dilantin to me, and I saved them up, and I took 34 of them and spent 5 days in ICU. And when I got out, they shipped me to CMC. And at CMC, their treatment for depression is to put you in a little room with no clothes, no blanket, no mattress, sleeping on a sheet of steel with no heat. God, I was hurting. And normally you're in there for 2 days, but they kept me there for 12 weeks because working in the psych department, they're like, all these psychs didn't know you had a problem. How are we going to know you have a problem? I'm telling them, you could ask. But that takes too much sense for Department of Corrections. So anyway, after 12 weeks, I finally told the chief psychiatrist that I thought he was a queen of grandiose illusions of being a man, and if he wanted to see me naked for the rest of my life, I could do that. And so the next day they brought me back in and told me that was the most emotion they'd gotten out of me in 12 weeks, and they let me back on the line. And when I got back on the line, there was this guy, his name was Dave, and I always called him Five. I called him Five because he delivered the message, the fifth tradition. Our primary purpose is to deliver the message to the addict who still suffers. And it didn't matter that I wasn't using, I was suffering. And he delivered the message to me, come to the meetings, and I started going to the meetings. And when I started going to the meetings, I thought, with my education and my background, I was just going to go in there and I was going to save everybody and cure everybody of drugs. I quit on my own. They just follow my advice and you're done. And I thought, before long I'll be the emperor of NA, of World Services of NA, and things will be different. But I got in there and found out everybody in NA was lifers just like me. They were convicted murderers, and they didn't want to hear my story. They didn't want to hear anything from me. It wasn't about what I had to offer at that time. It was about me learning about myself. It was about me being able to express what I had learned about myself and what I intended to do about it and what I was doing about it. And found out that there was like 200 people at each meeting, and there was 400 people on the list, so 200 people would go one week and the next 200 would go the next week. And I found out that if I was of service, I could go every week. So I immediately became of service. And when I became of service, I started getting involved in other people's lives. And as I got involved in other people's lives, it was less about me. And the only reason why I used drugs and everything was because life was about me. Don't you know who I am? Don't you know how important I think I am? And if I want it, I should have it. And I should have it now. And so by getting involved in other people's lives, the less it was about me and the more I learned to care. By being of service, I got better spiritually, I got better mentally, I got better physically. And I soon became a teacher's aide and a tutor and educator for infectious disease control, and volunteered for every group I could get involved into. And in 1 2-year period, I helped over 36 people get their GEDs, and I was feeling good about myself. I was seeing my service making a difference in people's lives, and I was feeling good. I was growing. I was feeling like my life mattered. before that, it didn't matter if I lived or died. It didn't matter when I was jumping people. If I got killed, so what? I'm doing life, and I had no hope of getting out. No lifers at that time were getting out. The governor had said the only lifers getting out was in a pine box. And so hope was gone. I didn't realize that freedom could be right there where I was. And I met my sponsor in 2002, and he wasn't my sponsor at the time. I sponsored him. And he could barely read. He read it like a second grade level. He couldn't write. And I moved him into my cell. And every night we would go to the yard. And for a whole summer, he was reading one easy reader book. And when he would make a mistake, I'd have him start at the beginning of the page again. And it took all summer to read this book. And by the end of 3 years, he got his GED. And in 2008, he paroled. And when he paroled, I told him, we're trading places. You're going to be my sponsor. And he goes, you have so much more clean time than I do. How could I be your sponsor? And I told him, it's not time. It's what you have to offer. You're going to be out there in the free world learning about NA on the outside. And you're going to have something to share with me. And so he became my sponsor, and he would send me packages and help me out. And in 2012, I got a date. I couldn't believe it. And the governor took it. He said he would never let me out. But I stayed clean. I stayed clean because I had internalized this program. And I had a value in life, and I was free in there regardless if they gave me my freedom or not. And in 2014, I got a date. And this time they let me keep it. And February 17th, I got out. And I was scared because when I was at CMC, they didn't allow wheelchairs. And so everywhere I went, people helped me. They would hold me up, and it'd be like 1,200 yards to get to the meeting. And people would help me get there, and they would help me get back. And it was devastating, when I lost my son, he was adopted, and I knew they changed his name, but they wouldn't change his social security number, so I tattooed his social security number on my chest in hopes of being able to find him. And so getting out, I had that hope, but I was scared. I got to CMC, I left CMC, I went to Pleasant Valley, and from there I went to Corcoran, and I had a wheelchair, and when I had problems physically, when my condition was really acting up, everybody knew me and they knew what to do, and I had help. I had help because people cared about me. People cared about me because I was working this program, and I was giving back, and I was being of service, and I was making a difference in people's lives, and it was awesome. But getting out, I'm thinking, who's going to help me now? How am I going to get by? What happens if I have a problem on the street? And who's going to care? And I was going to this transitional home, and when I read the paperwork on the transitional home, it said groups from 8 in the morning until 8:30 at night, and I'm thinking, and they had all kinds of rules, and like, man, this is worse than prison, because there's no emotion on paper. All you see is these guidelines, and it's like, God. So my release date came, and my sponsor was there to pick me up, and he took me out. He took me to breakfast, and then he took me to a meeting, and with his wife, and met his family, and they took me to Los Angeles from Corcoran, and I got this transitional home, and thinking, oh man, here goes lockup. And this counselor that was working, she was a lesbian. She had great big old arms, bigger, and she comes up and she wraps her arms around me, and she says, welcome home, Dale. And it's like, wow, I got my name back. I was no longer inmate or logure or H20362, and I got a hug, a real hug. Since 1996, when I took family visiting away, I hadn't had any physical contact. I hadn't been touched, and I was unfit to touch. The staff don't touch you in there. And this hug was amazing. It was the most memorable thing of my that could happen to me in my life and my freedom. And it's through, and this woman, she's in NA. She just gave me this loving hug, and it's, and I just held on to that, and it opened this world up to me. And from there, I got involved in NA and started going to meetings. And when I got out of there, I instantly became of service. And I started getting, I started off as a chip person, and then later on went into literature, and I was writing stories for the Never Alone, San Fernando Valley NA Never Alone newsletter, and the layout design editor was stepping down, and she came to me and she says, publisher? And I'm like, well, I've seen it. I said, but give me 2 hours, I'll know it. And so I became the design editor for the newsletter. May 6th, I'm supposed to become the chairman. And, I'm a literature person in my home group. My phone, people call me, it don't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I roll over, I put a big smile on my face, and I answer the phone. And I put that smile on my face because I want to reach out to that person and show them that there's a caring person on this end of the phone. And they can hear it in my voice if I'm smiling or if I'm not. And I learned that through this program. I learned that it's very important to give back what is so graciously given to me. I mean, people in this program, they love me. And it's like, I'm a convicted murderer. I don't have to do anything wrong. If somebody accuses me of something, I go back to prison for life. And I don't fear that. I don't fear that because I have so many people in this program who make sure that my life works. I thought when I got out that I'd be lucky to have a studio apartment, sharing it with a bunch of guys. And, the VA came through. I have a real nice one-bedroom apartment for $230 a month with a great view of the park across the street. And everything just starts falling into place. I have enough to live on. And I have a family. And my family is called Narcotics Anonymous. And it doesn't matter where I go. There's people in the program. There's people reaching out and saying, we love you, Dale. We're so excited to see you. And that's the promise in this program, freedom. And I claim that promise, and I got that promise, and I save it. And I am so grateful for every day and every moment in this program. And recently I did find my son, and because I wasn't there for him, from the time he was 12 until now, he's been in and out of prison. He's only had 1.5 years of freedom in 16 years. And he grew up thinking he was Mexican, and he joined a Mexican gang. And now he knows he's native and he's following the heritage. He dropped out of the gang, and I've been able to make a difference in his life. I've been able to reconnect with him. And I've been able to reconnect with him because of this program and what I learned in this program. And he's going to get out in 2021, and he wants to parole down here to me and me to adopt him and give him his name back. And it's like, I'm a convicted murderer. He wants me for his dad again. I'm just overwhelmed, I mean, sometimes, I look at myself and it's like, am I even human? But I know I am because this program tells me I am. I know I am because this program taught me to love again. It taught me to care. It taught me to value not only my life, but the life of others. And to give that one message. There's only one message in this program. Everything else is just lost. That message that any addict can stop using. Any addict can find a new way to live. Any addict can lose that desire, and any addict can have hope again. And by having hope, they will have freedom. And all they have to do is go to meetings and listen, one day at a time. And when they leave that meeting, leave it with phone numbers. And you get a phone number, you leave that meeting and you call that person you got the number from. You let them know that you are a person who is serious about your program. And then the next time you call them when you do have a problem, they'll be more willing to listen and be there for you, because you've already showed them that you want this program. And if you want this program as much as I do, you'll be the person up there saying, I have 21 years. You know? This program is amazing. And the promise is hope. The promise is freedom. The message is hope. You know, I have the basic text. I have living clean. I have the guiding principles, and I don't just read them. I internalize what I read, and I read it again and again and again, and I share with others, and they share with me what we think it means. And by internalizing it, by feeling it, by going to these meetings, and becoming connected with others who are just like me, my life has value today. Because I have a family called Narcotics Anonymous. Thank you.